I'm going to show you how to tie my Pyramid Lake bugger. This is the fly that I use in tandem with the Pyramid Lake beetle most often. And this is the fly that the beetle kind of keeps suspended off the bottom just slightly, but most of the time it is actually scraping along the bottom. The thing with this fly is you want it to be bulky. There's a couple things I do to achieve that. I use an extremely large chenille. And then when I tie it in with saddle hackle, I usually use 2 of these. I tie it in a very quick way, yet a durable way. I don't really go much for looks or neatness or making sure it's the prettiest fly out there, because I just want to have a lot of these. I want to have a variety of colors, although this black and chartreuse combination has been my best, my most productive. If you haven't seen it, go watch my ladder video. This is the combination I'm using in that video, and that particular morning the fish really like to take this bugger, which isn't always the case. Usually it acts more as an attractor, and then they'll come in to inspect what's stirring up the sediment on the bottom, and they'll see this little thing wiggling and they'll take it. But there are days definitely where they go for the bugger. If I had to have one color, I'd have the black, but it's also really good to have white as well as olive. People swear by their colors, but those are the 3 that I really focus on. I remember there was one trip to Pyramid in particular. We were there in April, and the fish were in thick, they were in shallow, they were in spawning mode, and you'd see schools of hundreds of fish coming by, and nothing wanted to have none of them wanted to eat what you had. But as soon as I tied on a white bugger paired with a beetle, they were all over it, and they were taking the beetle, but it was the white bugger on there that was getting them in. Any other color bugger, they'd swim 30 feet wide just to go around your flies. But as soon as I put that white one in, as soon as I switched out for that white fly, it's just fish after fish. So color is very important when fishing Pyramid. So let's get started. I'm using a Firehole Sticks. I'm not sure exactly which fly, which hook, I'll put it in the description, but it's a straight shank. It's a extra heavy gauge wire, and it's a size 4. Has a really wide hook gap. Something to keep in mind is when you have this paired with a beetle, it's going to be riding hook point up because you have the beetle tied off the bend of the hook here. So you don't have to worry about that hook getting doled up on the sand or anything. If you're fishing it in a rocky area, you may want to make sure you either have a more buoyant fly or a not so heavy of a sink tip, maybe just a hover line or a type 3 line or something where you're not going to get hung up on those rocks. Starting with a black thread, Veevus 16-aught. I haven't tied this in about a year. I didn't even do a warm-up for this video, so let's see how it goes. You can't really mess it up, but bear with me if I make a few mistakes. I always like to go down the bend of the hook just a little bit, especially when you're tying in a Marabou tail. Now for the tail, like I said, I'm using this really light chartreuse color. It's kind of like a yellow, but I like to pull the lower webby fibers off of a saddle hackle. So I'm just going to look through the pack right here to find one that is going to suit my needs. I prefer some longer fibers. We'll see what we can find. All right, that one will do. So I'll just pull that feather free from the clump. And so you can see these upper fibers that are webby, and then they start to get a little bit more marabou-y down here. And then these are the ones I want to go for. They're just going to flow really well. You can get a lot of movement out of them without a lot of bulk. Okay, let me just isolate the fibers I do want. All right, then watch how I do this. I'm going to find about an inch, maybe an 1.5 inch section that I like. I'm going to start at the top here. I'm going to pull them away from the feather, and then I'm going to fold them down. And then I'm going to pull them away from the feather again. So now I stripped that whole section and the tips are still aligned. Transfer them to the other finger. If you want, you can wet them, make them more manageable. You'll notice I do tie a pretty short tail on these. I've just, for some reason, I don't know exactly what it is, have had so much more success fishing these with a short tail. It's not even that they short strike the long tails. I get more bites when it's on a short tail with the bugger, which doesn't really make sense to me because when I'm tying my balanced leeches for Pyramid, I give them an extra long tail, much longer than I would give them for most still waters. So who knows? This works for me. You might find something different that works for you. So I don't want to build up a lot of bulk back here, so I'm just stripping off the fuzzies from the ends, kind of leaving the bare quills. Okay, that'll be all right. I don't care if there's a bump back here, really. It's all going to get covered up by this crazy mess. Keep those fibers on top. Even though I am tying in a shorter tail, I'm leaving this one a little longer than what I would consider to be ideal, because when I'm out on the water, I can always shorten it up real quick if I want to, but I can't make it longer on the water if I want to. Okay, that's going to look great. Okay, now I'm going to tie in the rest of my materials, which is the Cactus Chenille and my saddle hackles. So for the chenille, I'm just going to pull the fibers away from the rope, expose the rope. Let me wet these feathers real quick, make them a little more manageable. I don't want them to get caught up in my other materials. Okay, I'll just put that out of the way for now. Now I gotta find 2 suitable hackles. I do like some hackles that are more stiff, shorter and stiffer. So I'll kind of look for these like sharp looking guys. There's a good one there, and then I just want to find one that matches it. Okay, got another good one there. Now to prep these, I find the area where the stiff fibers meet the webby fibers, and I'll leave maybe, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch of those webby fibers on there. Then I'll strip off everything below to expose the bare stem. And then I'll do that same thing to the other one. Okay. Set these up right on top of each other. So they're both curving the same way. You can see that, so they'll fit into each other well. Just like that. Bring the tips up. The tips line up great. Now I'm going to grab just the very tips and then kind of pull these fibers back, because the tips are going to be my tie-in anchors. Like I said, it doesn't have to be pretty. Just expose those tips. Pull back as many of the fibers as you can. All right, that's what I'm going to tie in. Okay, work my way up the hook shank. It is important to get your thread on the hook shank. It's not just to get your thread from the rear up to the front, but your materials are going to have a much better purchase on the thread than they are on the slippery metal. Okay, I'm about an entire hook eye behind the eye of the hook now, so I'll throw in my half hitch, pull over my bobbin cradle, and get my thread out of the way. Okay, so before we wrap these materials up, I have to measure them so that the chenille is the same length as the end of the stem of the feathers. Then I'm going to cut it there. So I want the rope of the chenille to be as long as the feathers, but I want the fibers of the chenille to be just shorter than the fiber of the feathers. So I'm going to figure out where that point is, about where the stiff fibers meet the webby fibers, and now I have to strip off all of this stuff off the rope, which actually doesn't take too long. Once you kind of get the hang of it, you can be a little more aggressive and find how to strip those. Since I haven't tied this in about a year, it may take me a minute to find my zone here. Okay, that's perfect. So I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of hard to see, but that is a little bit shorter than my hackles, which is great because all I'm going to do is I'm just going to twist these up together. And then the rope of the chenille is going to wrap around the saddle hackles, and it's going to give them durability. And then I'm not dealing with counter wrapping wire or anything like that. It's just a very simple process. Get these fibers out of the way again. Okay, so you just want to make sure you get everything lined up well before you start to twist. And then once you're there, you can just start twisting. It'll make a nice little rope. You don't want to twist too much. You could break your hackles. Okay, now you can kind of come through with your fingers, loosen up some of these fibers, get them all sticking up. All right, then you're just gonna start wrapping these up the hook. Every wrap, push everything back, preen it backwards. This should be just about enough to get us up to the front, but if I find I have too much or too little, I'll just undo some of the wraps, come back, start again, space them differently. But this looks like it's shaping up pretty well. That ended a little early. It's a little more length than I'd like. So I'm going to go back out to there. Now I'm just going to not really care so much about packing those in so tightly. Okay, so now you can see I'm done with the chenille, but I still have the webby portions of the saddle hackles to go, and that's what's going to give you a really good finish to this fly. I don't know if having the webby fibers really makes the fly more effective, but I think it makes it look better. Theoretically, I think it does because it adds a little bit of more movement. Those webby fibers flow better. So that's what I'm going by. But really, I'm pretty sure I just do it because it looks a little prettier, in my opinion. Okay, so now I got that right there. I'm just going to push that with my thumb so it stays in place while I get a couple securing wraps around all that. Okay, do a few more wraps in front now. Come in and snip all this free. Okay, I'm going to pull these fibers back, get them out of the way for a minute while I just make a neat little head to the fly. You just want to cover up these ends so there's no chance of them pulling free. Once I've made a little head, I'll do some wraps with some super glue coated thread. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'll take my super glue, apply a little bit to the thread. There we go. And then just go over top of that there. Push that around. Now it's starting to flow, which is good. That's what we want. Okay, and then just a few whip finishes right here at the front. You're good to go. Let me kind of push these out so you can get the full effect. If you were to fish Pyramid Lake and you were only going to strip on a sinking line, tie this fly, pair it with that fly. If they're not taking that, it's very unlikely they're going to be taking anything else. But again, you never know. Try your own stuff, get creative, see what works best for you. This is just my experience.